Once again, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's presentation, The Long Road to Conversion, the Digital Sales Funnel, presented by Esco Strong and Andrew Martin. Esco, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm Esco Strong, Senior Group Manager with the Atlas Institute, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today to hear about our latest digital marketing insight entitled The Long Road to Conversion, the Digital Sales Funnel. We have the study's author, Andrew Martin, also from the Institute, here with us today to present the research findings, which we're very excited about, and we think you will all find very interesting as well, to revisit a concept that has sort of been lost in translation as we've gone to the digital world, ironically, where things are actually more accountable and more measurable. As you know, at the Institute, we've been working hard for a long time on working towards a better system of making media accountable, most notably our engagement mapping initiative as an alternative method to ROI calculation. And this is another study that fits in very nicely with that and adds another interesting piece to that pie, to that puzzle. So without further ado, I present Andrew Martin.
Thanks, Esco. And good morning to you all, and thank you for coming to this presentation. It's really exciting, and as anything with the word digital sales funnel in its title is going to be, I imagine that some of you are intrigued. Some of you are probably wondering, what's going on about this. Before I dive into the details of the research and set this up, I really want to talk just for a second about what's the real big picture in all of this, and it's time. When it comes to digital advertising, there's a lot of confusion and just a lot of uncertainty about what role time plays into how we should be doing our advertising, how we should be making our messages reach consumers. And I think that we need to clear up the misunderstanding, and that today's research should leave you all with a lot better understanding of the purchase funnel online and the importance of time in our metrics. So without further ado, you're all our advertisers, and I'm sure you've seen a slide like this before. It talks about the complexity of digital advertising, and here we have a hypothetical conversion history from one particular person here who's seen an ad which is represented by each of these circles. So you can see they've seen multiple ads prior to the time of conversion from different channels and video, search, from different kinds of publishers, portals and social media. And a lot of the previous research the Institute has done is sort of backed out this story, so we can say with a lot of confidence that this really is the reality, that most of your converters have conversion histories that look something like this. Now, there's been one thing missing from this picture, which is time. We know that the reality is that you reach multiple times across channels over an extended period of time. And we really don't know much more than that. In fact, do we mean days, weeks, or months is even sort of up in the air right now. Now, why time matters, of course, is that where and when you reach somebody affects the message you're going to give them, and it also affects how you might measure the performance and the expectations you set for the advertising. Now, as an example here, I'm actually going to turn to a marketing campaign run by Apple. For those of you who don't recognize what that guy is holding in his hands there, that's an iPod Touch. So this is actually an in-stream video ad that I've taken a still of that was running on Hulu back in February, earlier in this month, in between some parts of The Daily Show. So you can imagine Apple buying this and probably thinks about it very similar to the way you would think of buying a TV spot for The Daily Show. With these expectations about who's watching, and not necessarily with some expectations that the person that's going to see this ad, which, by the way, doesn't have any text in it at all really until the very end, is going to go off and do something. That's different, perhaps, from what Apple expects from an ad running here on CNET or on their homepage. They've got a little flash ad that basically throws this monochromatic ad in your face. You can imagine the audience is coming to CNET's very technical, and you can see the review tab is right there from the home page. You can imagine that this site isn't just about news, it's also about doing product research. So I think Apple probably expects different things from this ad than they would, say, the video ad. And then finally, let's take a look at some of the advertising for another iPod, keyword in this case for the Google search results page. Imagine, this is somebody who's seen some of the prior advertising and, now knows what keyword to type in, so they've done a branded search. And, this isn't pretty picture-oriented advertising. This is all about, getting people to particular websites so that they can make a purchase. And all these three examples, I think, show that Apple's doing a very good job of leveraging the digital purchase funnel and is actually pretty well hooked into this traditional concept from marketing of the purchase funnel. Now, I know this is going to be a review for a lot of you on the call, but sort of go over what do we mean by the purchase funnel. Well, it's the idea that that most consumers need to become aware of a brand or a product or a service before they can go out and buy it. And many of them will go through a phase of considering alternative options. And then finally, they'll go into what I have labeled here as pursuit, although other people have labeled it as shopping and some other things, which is like a phase of doing sort of, hey, where can I get this for the best deal? And I'd argue that Apple has an understanding that the different media formats and the different audiences that each of these publishers, Hulu, CNET, and Google, offers, has an affinity to a particular part of the funnel. And, even bigger than just saying Apple understands this, I think a lot of marketers that are in the room today, whether you explicitly or implicitly are planning your strategy and your tactics for your campaigns, are using these kinds of concepts when you want to think about how do I, build up marketing share, and how do I, get more people to come to my client's website, or my website if you're a direct advertiser. And when it gets right down to it, that Hulu probably is better for building awareness in its TV-like properties, and Google's great for closing the sale. Now, the whole idea of a digital purchase funnel has been pretty controversial. In fact, I've got a couple quotes here. The first one is actually a Business Week headline from 2007, and it really says, the old sales model is dead. Now, people have said it's dead, other people have said it's a cycle, other people said it's lived. The point is that there's a lot of controversy about whether or not we can find an online purchase funnel. And I think Avanish Kaushik, who the author of Web Analytics in Our Today, is sort of one of the web analytics gurus, actually captures it quite nicely in this quote from his blog that I'm going to read that he wrote. He actually wrote this about a month ago. He says, it turns out that most online marketers tend to think of life online, at least, to be all about one-night stands. Come, wallet out, convert. Now, I don't think that most online marketers think this way. I certainly think a lot of web analytics people think this way. And what Avanish is really getting at is although we may be strategizing and planning our marketing campaigns around this idea of that people go through the purchase funnel, it's certainly not the way we've been measuring it. And whether or not the purchase funnel are dead or not is sort of it's a funny debate. As far as I know, nobody has been able to say that it does or doesn't exist, and we don't have a lot of hard evidence one way or the other. In fact, as an industry, we're profoundly ignorant about some very basic questions, like how far back as advertisers are we building up relationships with our in-market consumers, and how much advertising across our channels and our campaigns are the people who are making purchases and signing up for our services seeing. So that's really where the jumping off point for this research was digging into these questions about advertising and timing, and then getting a little more ambitious and seeing, hey, can we get and see the digital purchase funnel? Now, before I start distracting you all with charts and pretty results, let me talk a little bit about how we did this research. We actually took over 65 million conversion histories from conversions that happened during Q2 and Q3 of 2008. Actually, we took the part of Q3 that happened pre-financial crisis and Christmas ramp up. And we took these conversions. It was across 250 different advertisers, running buys on over 1,000 sites. And we were able to sort of look at all of these conversion histories over a period of 90 days. And we were able to start answering some of these basic questions like how much do you see and how far back are these relationships. So before I talk about how this chart answers this, let me just talk you through how to read one particular line on it. So if you see down there at the very bottom of the chart, we have, 1 day prior to conversion, and you can see that there's a median of 2.2 events in the average converter history that occur in that last 24 hours prior to conversion. Now remember, this is actually a median that's across 67 million different conversions. So that's pretty robust data. One of the first things that's really interesting is simply how quickly advertising builds up. In the last 48 hours, on average, users are exposed to at least 5 different ads from the same advertiser. And what's even more interesting, and I think really surprising, and certainly surprised me, is that as we go back to 2 weeks to 1 month, even up to 60 days and 90 days, we just see more and more advertising building up. In fact, by the time we get to 90 days, consumers are seeing almost 19 ads. That's amazing. That shocked me, and I wouldn't be surprised if it shocks a few people on the call today. I don't think often that we realize just how far back these relationships that we are going. We're building up and reaching in-market consumers months prior to conversion, not days or weeks. So there's a lot of events prior to conversion, and these relationships are really long. So that's interesting, and that certainly should change some of the ways we think. But what's even more interesting is when you think about if we're reaching people with 18 different kinds of advertising over 3 months, we're definitely reaching them in different times and different places and with different publishers. So what we wanted to look at is let's see if we can find a digital purchase funnel. And so, alas, we can. In fact, what's really exciting about this slide is that when we took those 67 million conversion histories and we said, okay, where do we see all the search engines delivering their interactions prior to conversion? How does that compare to the social media sites or the news sites or the photo sites? We found that there's definitely distinct times where different publishers are much more likely to show up. Let me just sort of, again, talk through one particular part of this chart. You look down there at the bottom of the funnel for search engines and affiliates. What we find out is that they deliver most of their interactions to consumers in the last 24 hours before conversion. So they're down at 1 day is sort of the part of the funnel that you're most likely to find them at. That's actually pretty amazing to me that search engines and affiliate networks can manage to deliver so much of their interactions in such a small period of time. And it's very different to, say, like the photography websites, such as Flickr or PhotoBucket, who, their median time that they appear in conversion histories is literally 31 days before conversion. And what this really tells us is that these sites are some of the first places where you'll reach your consumers who are going to go on to make a purchase. But they're spreading their interactions out over more time, and so they get up further in the funnel. Now, so there's one big distinction on this website, which, in this chart that everyone can see, which is, search and affiliates at the bottom, and you have to go another week before you find any other kind of publisher. And really, it's almost 2 weeks before you get to most of them. And let's just so that's the big distinction. I think we're going to come back to that a little more. Let me just talk a little bit about where we see some of these other display publishers lining up. Why is it that auto, finance, telecom, live down close in the middle part of the funnel, whereas photo lives near the top? What we see there is that you think about the auto or the telecom, which is really voice over IP and cell phone providers, or finance, which is a lot of advertisers of online trading platforms. And there's a lot of websites that are great for doing information or for doing research, to either buy a cell phone or find the best voice IP service, go to cars.com or, all these other different places, Bankrate, for example, and finance. So there's a lot of sites or publishers in these particular categories who let consumers do a lot of research, and that's combined with advertisers like yourself who have clients with online business models where you can sign up to, go get a quote from a dealer, or, sign up for the next, financial platform that you're interested in, or buy your cell phone, or sign up for a plan with T-Mobile. So there's a lot of really, tightly contextual things that drive some of these publishers to the middle parts of the funnel. And it's very different from, say, music or photo sites, or for that matter, video and social media. People are going to a photo site or a social media site to, share photos of their friends or get in contact, or they're listening to music. None of that really is about researching particular products, and it's so it's not a surprise to see them living up in the funnel. So, what does this really get down to? Which is, the predictions you might make, sort of knowing the purchase funnel theory, really do pan out when we look at reality. There really are sites that generate awareness, and they're the kind of sites you think. Things like video that act like TV, social media sites which are communities. We've also got sites that show consideration where you can do product research. And then we have things like search engines that are great for navigating in and closing the deal. So this is pretty exciting and cool, and to my knowledge, nobody's ever done this before. And, this should just put this whole talk about the purchase funnel being dead, this should just end it right here. Let me talk about some of the implications for this. And I wanted to get back to this idea that, if we sort of take this stylized inverted pyramid to mean the purchase funnel and look at, what's the really big pattern, well, it's that, search and affiliates live down here really close to the bottom of the funnel in the last couple hours and days before conversion. And almost every other publisher lives in this area that's 2 or 3 weeks before conversion. Now, that's okay. Again, it's what we expect, if we believe in the purchase funnel. But the problem is you can see that little area that I just highlighted in red at the bottom of the funnel. That's where, if you're running a campaign of large enough volume, the last ad is going to live. It's not that hard to reach and market consumers, especially when they're doing behaviors like using search or doing some sort of product research that really give away their intentions. And as advertisers, we've been smart enough to get our advertising to people's eyeballs at those points. So measuring with the last ad ends up rewarding the things that ends up at the very bottom of the funnel, which in this case is a pretty narrow category of publishers. In this case, search engines and affiliates. This, of course, is a problem because almost every other type of publisher lives out in this 2 to 3 week band, and they're not likely to have to be serving the last ads, so their contributions are getting zeroed out. So, on a simple level of fairness, does this make any sense? Now, it goes beyond fairness because we also think that, measuring like the purchase funnel exists makes you better media planners because some previous research we've done, about that actually ESCO authored about search and display synergy, has really shown us that by making, strategic display purchases, you can grow the search conversions. So by planning and measuring an entire funnel, you can get better at feeding the bottom parts of the funnel by knowing where to reach audience and know to drive people down the funnel. And it really does make a difference. So, smarter media planning and, in media planning that's going to sync up with the way we strategize, we just, need to go on and ditch the last ad model. Now, there's other trends that have happened because we've been sort of myopic and in that one-night stand mode that Avanish likes to talk about. And that's been a trend of shortening your view conversion windows and your click conversion windows. And here again we have this hypothetical conversion history. And it's got lots of sites and lots of channels. But what's interesting is one of the things I ran across doing this research is that when we look at your high-value action tags, your registrations, your purchase confirmations, and your downloads, found out that 75% of the view tags use windows that are 2 weeks or less. In fact, plenty of advertisers are using view windows of a week. Well, look what that does. It chops all the diversity out of your conversion histories, and that's especially bad because it gets rid of advertisers who made a contribution in the middle and upper parts of the funnel. In fact, you can see from this example, we dropped out all the contribution from social media and video. So there's no way that they could have a good blast ad performance if they're dropped out. Even more significantly, even if you were to use engagement mapping, you keep a short conversion window, you won't be able to see the performance contributions from the upper funnel sites either. So bring these rich histories back in by opening up conversion windows, and remember that as we move away from the last ad model, we need to open up conversion windows so that we can see the contributions that the entire funnel has been making. So what does this all mean for advertisers? Well, first of all, I hope I've convinced you that the last ad model is just not right. I think there's a lot of evidence that it just doesn't do a very good job of representing the actual way digital media works. Not only do we see so many different sites before conversion, and we have all these channels, it measures the very bottom of the purchase funnel, and it's a funnel that stretches weeks and months, not just 2 days. So by adopting an engagement mapping model, and especially with flexibility, you can find a model that will reflect your goals, whether you're a hardcore DR advertiser or whether you want your media to do a lot of branding and DR goals. Second recommendation is, again, I covered it before, lengthen the conversion windows, especially view conversion windows. Engagement mapping really won't work with short windows because you drop out the contributions from these upper funnel and middle funnel websites. And even more basically, think about how much money you spend on websites that are, in most of these display publishers, that live in the middle and upper parts of the funnel. You're paying them millions of dollars to serve ads, and you're throwing their data away. Heck, you're paying Microsoft to store all the data about your performance, and then you don't even use it. So take advantage of that rich data in your histories. Finally, there's a lesson here, which is third-party ad serving. I didn't cover this requirement when I first talked about the study, but those 250 advertisers, we actually made sure that they were doing both search and display advertising through third-party ad serving so that we could see this entire funnel. If you aren't tracking your search and your video and your rich media buys along with your display buys, you won't be able to do the kind of centralized analytics that gets you to see the purchase funnel, that lets you see your search and display synergies, and really lets you leverage and optimize along the entire part of the funnel. And I understand that sometimes you don't want to manage your media through the media console for all the channels, but I still think that at the minimum you need to be tracking it all through third-party ad serving. Publishers, of course, they're going to be reading this, and a lot of them, are going to realize that they're in the middle and upper parts of the funnel, and they're probably going to have some conversations and want to start them. This isn't an adversarial relationship either. Because publishers, if you let your publishers know where they live in the funnel and how you're measuring them, you can tailor your messaging better. You can make sure you're buying the right kind of ads for that publisher, for the audience you're reaching there. And this really gets everybody's expectations set properly. Is it really fair to treat Google and Hulu with the same sort of, did they make somebody convert in the next 30 minutes, expectations? So, that's sort of the ending of the non-interactive part of this presentation. I'm going to throw it back over to Chris here to talk about how to put some questions into the system, and then Esco and I are going to be throwing around and answering questions. So, Chris?
Thank you very much, Andrew. Ladies and gentlemen, I do want to be able to have you answer questions or ask questions. Just go ahead in the upper left-hand corner, click Q&A. That'll display the question and answers pane. Simply type your question into the text field and click Ask. You also can edit your question at any time, but please know that if you do edit your question, your original question will be removed from the active queue. I see that we do have several questions coming in, so at this time I want to pass the phone back over to Esco. Esco, you now have the floor.
So we do have a couple questions here. The first one for Andrew is if you can please explain what you meant by events when we were talking earlier about those histories and the number of events that people were seeing prior to a conversion.
Sure, sure. You know, I should have covered that a little more detail. What I meant by events was both clicks and impressions. And in fact, you know, even rich media interactions would be counted in that. So that's what I meant by events, which is it's sort of the total amount of advertising messaging that went across to a consumer. All right, next question.
All right. Is it possible to go back to slide 6? We have a few questions pertaining to slide 6.
Sure.
So the first question is whether this is the same, whether we're talking about the same consumer seeing all of these ad events and whether they are from the same advertiser.
Yes. So we are indeed talking about the same consumer. So we have the ability to actually look back at the individual conversion histories and say over 90 days how many ads from the same advertiser or you know, at least advertisers that were shared to the tag. So you can imagine that some advertisers in our system, you know, do some joint campaign. But in general, I think the thing to realize about this, and again, I think I'm not surprised that there's you know, a little misunderstanding about this slide. Is simply that, you know, this looks across campaigns and across channels, and a lot of our discussions about frequency tend to be focused on individual campaigns and individual channels. And this is really a very consumer and really converter sort of perspective on this.
Can you also confirm, Andy, that that the ad events that we're talking about here, what channels are these coming from? Are these online only?
Yes, so these are only online channels. You know, in a more perfect world, it would be great if we could marry this with online data, and maybe in some future where everybody has an IPTV, we'll be able to do that. But these are, in fact, basically search and the display channels and probably a little bit of video.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the conversions that were used here? Specifically, what type of conversions are we talking about on this slide and also in terms of that funnel slide that we saw?
Sure. So we actually set a pretty high bar for this. So when we looked at these conversions, we wanted to pick action tags where the conversions actually had a dollar value assigned to them. So for example, if someone had set their tag as a sales confirmation or as, you know, the endpoint of a registration process, or had, you know, indicated in some other way that the tag had sort of a lead generation value of some sort, you know, that's actually the tags from the individual advertisers that we limit ourselves down to. So this isn't, you know, homepage tags, most general page view tags really aren't a part of this data set. So it's a pretty high bar to cross.
Okay. We have a question here regarding the length of time that we're looking back. Mm-hmm. And the question is regards to going back 90 days. How relevant is it to actually count 90 days worth of history? How do you know that the stuff that's occurring, you know, at the top of that funnel is actually having an effect at the bottom of the funnel?
Well, I mean, I certainly think that's a relevant question. And, you know, is the advertising that showed up 90 days ago the most important thing that somebody saw? Probably not. But nonetheless, you know, I have some confidence in saying both from our search and display synergy research, you know, and from, you know, just in general this idea of the sales funnel that, you know, these are opportunities to influence what people do and what they see, and, you know, they build your brand awareness. Now, you know, a lot of advertisers aren't going to, you know, necessarily think they want to go back all of 90 days. Part of going back this far is simply, you know, trying to find out really how far back does those relationships go. But I think, you know, it's pretty clear from this data that, you know, a lot of advertising reaches somebody who's in market, who is going to be in market sometime in the next couple of months, out there in that 60 to 90 day window, and certainly out past 1 month.
Okay, Andy, can you, so you've spoken a couple times about how last ad is a very limited view and it doesn't take into account the entire funnel. What are some alternative approaches to using last ad? If last ad does not work, how can someone get that entire purchase funnel into their attribution and also the way that they're optimizing and actually paying on media?
So The first basic steps that I covered were simply to, you need to move over to an attribution model that uses, it's like engagement mapping really, that actually allows you to take into account all of these clicks and impressions that occurred before conversion out to the limits of your conversion window. So, if you want to see the entire funnel, extend your conversion windows, both view and click windows back at, out to 30 days or 60 days, and use engagement mapping and pick a model that reflects your campaign's goals.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on engagement mapping for those that may not be familiar with it?
Sure. So engagement mapping is Microsoft's solution to an alternate way of doing attribution. And what engagement mapping does is that it actually breaks up the sort of single conversion credits that we've been assigning to whatever was the last click or the last view in a conversion history, and says, all right, we see, a couple clicks here and a few views from, CNET in the history. And so CNET gets a partial credit for the views it delivers, and Google gets some partial credit for the clicks it delivers. And really what this results in is that you can now calculate sort of an engagement mapping CPA based on the conversion credit engagement mapping has given to the sites that live higher in the funnel. And from that, from that engagement mapping CPA, you can actually use it just like you would use your CPA optimization tools that were based on the last ad CPA.
Okay. You had a slide, Andy, that had the acronym TPAS. Can you explain what TPAS stands for?
Sure. TPAS stands for third-party ad serving. And again, this is really just a technology that allows us to, see advertising across all these channels. So you can track your search, your display buys on multiple sites, your network buys, all through a third-party ad server that centrally serves the ads and tracks, who saw what. And third-party ad serving is important not just for seeing the entire purchase funnel or using engagement mapping, but this is a great way of doing CPA deduplication. So it's a pretty basic technology for in the advertising world online. It's really the backbone.
Okay, one more time, Andy, could you confirm for us how many different advertisers the data in the funnel slide came from?
Sure, 250 advertisers across all the major verticals that we have industry in.
Great. And just to go back to the third-party ad serving question, is third-party ad serving done via cookies?
Yes, cookies are instrumental to making third-party ad serving work. Just as they're central to making site analytics data work with something like Omniture or Ad Center Analytics, third-party ad serving, puts a cookie on a user's converter on a user's computer that allows us to say, hey, they saw an ad on CNET, and they saw an ad on Google, and they saw an ad on Hulu, and be able to tie that all together and centrally record it. While Esko's grabbing a question here, I actually want to point out a couple things at the bottom of the question slide. Some of you who are sharp or like to multitask have probably already noticed that we have the URLs up for both where you can get the PDF copy of the DMI. Also, if you want to look at some of that previous research I've mentioned, we've got the website for the Atlas Institute up there. And then finally, the contact information for the Institute here at Microsoft. Do we have any more questions, Esko?
We've got one asking whether data is available for this study by vertical, and I'm going to assume by vertical we're talking about advertiser vertical.
Well, we don't have the data available for most verticals at this moment, and I think down the road it's possible that we'd be doing that. In the DMI itself, actually, we've actually done a little bit of diving into some of the categories, but not by the verticals.
So for someone who wants to actually see this data for their specific vertical or even their specific advertiser, is there a way to do so?
Yes. So if you're using third-party ad serving through Microsoft, using our Media Console platform, you can actually order a conversion funnel analysis that will show the conversion funnel for your advertisers. And this will actually show where the different publishers deliver their advertising over time to your converters.
Okay. Wait a minute or so here in case there are any other questions. There are a few questions that were very specific that we will try to answer offline to those individuals. Looks like there are no further questions at this time. So I want to really thank all of you again for joining us. And I encourage any of you who have any further questions or want to know more about this capability or want to see your own individual sales funnels to follow up with your representatives from Microsoft and from Atlas. Go ahead and take a look at this paper. Please give it a read. And if you have questions about the research specifically, follow up with any of us here at the Institute using the email alias that you see there on screen. So again, much thanks to all of you today for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to extend a special thanks to our presenters, Esko Strong and Andrew Martin, for presenting today. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webcast. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes today's Microsoft webcast. You may now disconnect from the audio portion of this conference.